In the cold, mist-shrouded forests of ancient Finland, where winter nights stretched endlessly and death was never far from daily life, the people spoke of a goddess who dwelled among the graves. Her name was Kalma, and the word itself means a grave, a direct, unflinching acknowledgement of mortality's reality. Unlike the heroic death gods of other mythologies, Kalma represented something more intimate and inevitable: the grave itself, the process of decay, and the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. To understand Kalma is to understand how the ancient Finns viewed death not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a natural transition to be respected and, in some ways, negotiated with. The word Kalma appears across Uralic languages with remarkably consistent meanings. In Samoyed languages, kolmu or halmer means corpse or the spirit of a dead person. In Mordvinic languages, Kalma or Kalmo means grave. This linguistic consistency reveals just how ancient and widespread this concept was among the Finno-Ugric peoples. In Finnish culture, the term carries multiple layers of meaning. It refers simultaneously to the physical grave, to death itself, to the corpse, and perhaps most memorably, to the distinct smell of decomposition. Kalma was known to smell like corpses. This was how she was recognized. And some sources describe her as moving like a puff of smoke, traveling on a vehicle of odors. This ethereal quality made her both omnipresent in places of burial and difficult to pin down. She could appear suddenly wherever death had left its mark. The modern Finnish word for cemetery, kalmisto, derives directly from her name. In the Kalevala, Finland's national epic compiled by Elias Lönnrot, the word Kalma appears several times with the meaning graveyard, though not always referring to a personified deity. This reflects an important truth about Finnish mythology. Many concepts existed as both abstract forces and personified beings, depending on context and need. Descriptions of Kalma's appearance in surviving Finnish folklore are very limited and not consistent. Most sources focus on what she is rather than how she looks. Modern authors and artists often imagine her as a decaying or shadowy woman haunting cemeteries, or as a gloomy goddess of death whose very body or aura smells of corpses. When Elias Lönnrot compiled the Kalevala, he wove together countless threads of oral tradition into a coherent narrative. Within this epic, Kalma appears not as a central character, but as a presence that colors the understanding of death and the afterlife. The Kalevala itself mentions Kalma in several passages, though often referring to the graveyard rather than a personified deity. In Rune 13, when the hero Lemminkainen pursues the wild moose through impossible landscapes, the text describes his journey. Glided o'er the plains of Kalma, through the kingdom of Tuoni, to the end of Kalma's empire, where the jaws of death stand open, where the head of Kalma lowers, ready to devour the stranger. Here, Kalma's domain is portrayed as a dangerous borderland, where death itself waits with open jaws. The true nature of Kalma, whether deity or concept, has been debated by scholars for generations. This debate reveals the complex relationship between abstract concepts and personified forces in Finnish mythology. Matthias Alexander Castrén, a pioneering Finnish ethnologist and linguist, argued that Kalma was indeed a deity. According to Castrén's research in folk poems, Kalma was an underground deity watching over the elves and other folk of the underworld Tuonela. Castrén's work, published posthumously in 1853 as Lectures on Finnish Mythology, was based on his extensive fieldwork among Finnic peoples and represented cutting-edge scholarship of the mid-19th century. Though later scholars like Karla Krohn disputed whether Kalma was truly worshipped as a distinct deity, the folklore evidence suggests she held a significant place in people's understanding of death and the afterlife. This scholarly disagreement highlights an important truth about Finnish mythology. The line between abstract concept and personified deity was often fluid. Finnish folk belief allowed for concepts to be addressed as if they were persons, invoked in ritual, and treated with the respect due to powerful forces, without necessarily becoming fully formed deities with detailed mythologies. Graves were Kalma's mansions, her beautiful homes, lovely houses, pinewood nests where it was pleasant to live and pass the time. This poetic description from traditional Finnish magic songs reveals a striking perspective. To Kalma, the grave was not a place of horror, but a dwelling place, even a pleasant one. Kalma was the goddess of death and decay who liked to linger in graveyards and cemeteries. When Kalma opened the door to her mansion, it meant someone was close to death. And when a person died, Kalma would hold them by one hand while Tuoni, the god of death, held the other. This imagery portrays death as a transition requiring guides. The dying person escorted by two deities into the afterlife, each with their distinct role. Kalma resided in Tuonela, the Finnish underworld, alongside other death-related figures. Tuonela was described as the realm of the dead, a dark place located at the northernmost part of the world, separated from the living world by a great divide through which flowed the dark river of Tuonela. Within this shadowy realm, Kalma had her specific responsibilities and domain. To fully appreciate Kalma's significance, we need to understand the Finnish concept of väki, a fundamental principle in Finnish folk religion. Väki referred to both a collective group of spirits and the spiritual power or force they embodied. Different types of väki existed for different domains: forest väki, water väki, fire väki, and, importantly, Kalmanväki, the väki of death. The term Kalmanväki translates to Kalma's folk, or the folk of death. In Finnish, Kalmanväki means both the spirits of the dead and the collective power inherent in them that could be used by a shaman to work sorcery against other people. The Kalmanväki were believed to be ruled by the ghost of the first person buried in a cemetery, who became its guardian spirit, or haltia. This meant that each graveyard had its own spiritual hierarchy and protector, with Kalma presiding over the broader concept of graves and the cemetery realm. These spirits of the dead were not simply passive ghosts. They represented a collective force that could be invoked by those who knew the proper rituals and songs. Finnish taittajat, the traditional magical practitioners who were healers, seers, and workers of protective magic, understood how to work with this power. The Kalmanväki could be summoned for various purposes: to add to one's own spiritual power, for protection, to cure diseases, or to ask for help in difficult situations. However, the Kalmanväki were also greatly feared. They brought with them the stench of decay and could manifest as vague spirits or even as swarms of flies. During the turning points of the seasons, when the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead grew thin, one might easily encounter them. The gathering of Kalmanväki around a person was considered a certain sign that death was approaching. People could become infected by this väki if they ate soil containing it, failed to perform rituals for the dead properly, or disrespected the deceased. This concept reveals the ancient Finnish understanding of death as a form of spiritual contamination or power that could affect the living. It wasn't simply that Kalma was a goddess to fear. She embodied and controlled a fundamental force in the universe. Proper rituals, respect, and knowledge were needed to avoid being harmed by Kalmanväki while still being able to work with it. The taittajat needed to understand how to handle all forms of väki, including the dangerous power of death. They sang incantations, performed rituals, and maintained the delicate balance between the living and the dead. While rooted in the Kalma concept, some folklore treats Kalmanväki as an impersonal or collective force from the dead, not subordinates of a deity named Kalma. What makes Kalma particularly intriguing is how the ancient Finns approached her. Rather than simply fearing her, Kalma was summoned for various purposes: to ask for help or advice, to add to one's own power, for protection, to cure diseases, to beg for forgiveness, or to ask her to come for support in a difficult situation. Traditional magic songs called her dread-inspiring Kalma, acknowledging her fearsome nature while still asking for her assistance. But she was also a goddess who could be invoked for help, whose power could protect as well as destroy, and whose domain, while dark, was described in the old songs as pleasant and peaceful. In Kalma, we see a culture that understood death not as an enemy, but as a transition, not as an end, but as a change of dwelling. And perhaps, in our modern world that often tries to hide death away, there is wisdom in remembering the goddess who moved like smoke through graveyards, who held the dying by the hand, and who reminded everyone that the grave, too, is a kind of home. Thank you so much for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think. If this story resonated with you, feel free to share it with a friend who might enjoy it too. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you again soon with another story to tell.